Okay, Michael, you know how we start all of our podcasts together. We start by We Are Live.
Which is always, I say, better than being dead. How are you doing, Martin?
I'm doing amazing, Michael. Thank you. What about you?
I'm doing awesome. As always, it's great to be back into the studio. What are we talking about today, you said?
We talked about e-commerce.
What's
Michael,
the E for again? I can't remember.
No idea. What is the E for?
No idea. Exciting?
Exactly.
Important? I can't really tell. If we're going to mispronounce stuff all day,
Yeah.
let's mispronounce the good stuff. And who's joining us?
We have Kasper today.
Novitsky.
Kasper Novitsky. Wow, you've done it perfectly.
How did I do? I got the thumbs up, so it must be good.
Yeah.
Here's the way I feel about this, and I say this all the time on the shows that I do. I've been living outside of my home country for about 6,000 or 7,000 years now, and nobody has a name that I grew up with. So I'm forced to try to understand other people's names, which I think is awesome. Don't you?
Definitely, I completely agree with you. And same as me, it's been many years, but I'm outside of my home country.
Yeah.
And I've tried my best.
I still can't pronounce your name.
Of course, it's really French. So.
Martin. It's not Martin. Anyway.
Martin.
So do you want to say hello or do you just want to keep gabbing? What are you doing?
Hello, Kasper. Welcome to E-commerce Undercover.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for the invitation.
It is our pleasure. And
definitely.
Where are you based, just out of curiosity?
I'm in Warsaw, Poland. That's where my company is as well.
That is so awesome. I've never been to Poland.
I've been.
Have you really?
Yeah.
God, I want to go. So it's one of the places in Europe that I have not been, and I'd really love to go.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, let me know when you swing by.
Oh, definitely. I mean, look at how beautiful your house is. We said it offline, but I mean, it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's a different way of housing in Europe and in the United States than there is in Asia. Right? Even in a very wealthy person's home, it's rare to see that type of thing. It's hard to explain. It's really beautiful. Anyway, maybe for our listeners, you can give us a little bit of your background for some context, and then we can jump into the main part of this conversation.
Okay. Well, I'm old. That's good. Many things happen in my life. I spent some time in the US, together with my family, both traveling and working. And part of this journey was starting a company with another few immigrants in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley, in the wonderful .com boom. Crazy things were happening. And then .com bust came in and the crazy things were happening.
Were you in Silicon Valley in the early 2000s?
Yeah, late 90s and early 2000s, yes.
What were you doing there?
I was a software engineer.
Are you an engineer by training?
I'm a physicist by training, but I really spent most of my life either writing software or leading teams that are building software systems.
How would you characterize, because so many people talk about what it was like to be in Silicon Valley, right? Or they write about it, but most people weren't there, right? They didn't experience it firsthand. You said you were old. It's really just it's a mischaracterization of just being really experienced in my mind. But I mean, I think it's my gray hair talking more than anything else. But I'm curious, really curious, what was the energy like there? What was the feeling like in Silicon Valley in the late 90s and early 2000s from your perspective? And then what do you bring forward with you to 2020 or 2022?
Yeah. So I think, we've experienced the kind of energy, the craze, the hope that there is no limit that was happening in 99 and 2000. And that was happening just last year, right? The crazy valuations, the startups popping left and right. Nobody made, I don't want to say nobody made revenue, but a lot of people without the revenue were valued billions, and that was kind of similar. We started company during this time, and one of our competitors was offering a BMW Z3 as a sign-in bonus. So 3-year lease on a Beamer just as a software engineer to join a company. And we're scratching our heads and thinking, what, how is this possible? Why does it make sense? Why would people do that? And, that was a bubble. So that's not the reality.
But don't you feel like that you learned from being in Silicon Valley in the late 90s and early 2000s that if I have to perk you into my company, if I have to convince you by giving you a Z3 for a 3-year lease that maybe there's something wrong with the company, and I'm not talking per se about your competitor, I'll leave that to them. But if there's not a compelling reason to join, to build something that's hard but useful, that's what a software engineer wants to do, no?
Yes, that's part of it. I think looking at the macro level, there are good times and there are not such a good
Sure.
times, and you kind of you should benefit from the good times, right? The availability of funds for startups, but you always need to keep in mind the bad times that are going to come and be
Absolutely.
prepared. Be frugal, focus on what's important, get the great people, convince them not with the Z3s, but with your mission and your team and other things that you're doing, right? And then okay, maybe I'll close the story on Silicon Valley. The startup failed after 4 years,
Okay.
and it was very painful, right? And we've made a lot of mistakes as the founders, and
Yep.
I think our investors made some mistakes, and CEO who was no longer a founder, he was a hired CEO. And I think the part of the lesson is to not repeat these mistakes, and you need to be prepared for hard times, and that's part of what we do.
So when I was growing up in the 1970s and 1980s in the United States, we used to have this idea called a depression mentality. And that depression didn't mean like mentally depressed. It meant like you grew up in the 19 teens and the 20s. So you went through the depression in the United States, and you, no matter how wealthy you got, you still kind of drove like a 10-year-old car, but you were always prepared for the next collapse, right? Do you feel like that's the thing that people remember, particularly people that are of that age that went through that and saw everything kind of disappear, say, okay, I get it? Because even Apple did this, right? Like Steve Jobs famously said, yeah, we almost failed once. That's why we have $300 billion in the bank that we don't need.
Yeah, so I think myself, I still take risks, right? And
Sure. So do I.
starting a company is one of those. If you just if you just want to be somehow super safe, have $300 billion in your bank account, right? That's very few can afford this.
Yeah, for sure.
But you need to remember that that there is a cycle, and some of these cycles are more difficult. Some are kind of easier to go through, and just be aware of them, right? And as a company, we're super lucky to fundraise late last year and get our Series A early this year, and but not I don't know. I think it's it's luck, but it's also vigilance, right? Like if there is opportunity, make sure that you can run for another 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, luck is something, and I always use the same quote. Gary Player, right, a famous South African golfer, once said, when a journalist said to him, "Wow, you seem to just be getting really lucky recently," and he was like, "Yeah, it's funny. The more I practice, the luckier I get." And I think it's the same thing in business. Did you start other companies in between your experience in Silicon Valley and the company you started now?
No.
That is awesome. Go ahead.
So part of the time I spent at Google as engineering director, it was also a very interesting ride, I would say.
Tell me.
I've opened together with another engineering director, a friend. We've opened engineering office here in Poland, and we started with kind of 3 people on board and grew to 100. And that was a startup-like journey, but within a big company that was doing well, right?
Yeah.
So a different thing. And just before No Magic, I joined another startup as a CTO, but it was also a company that was already started. It was still in kind of a high risk domain than Google. And I think starting No Magic was really fulfilling one of the promises that I gave myself after my first startup failed. Because on one end I was heartbroken that it happened, and on the other, there is something really amazing in going from 0 to 1, right?
It really is.
So I wanted to repeat this.
Did I just feel like, did your friends, when you finally went and started your other company, right? When you started No Magic, did your friends go, really? You're going to do this thing again? Do you know what I mean?
Um, yeah, some of the
It's okay.
the
Even without the
ones.
answer, I knew the answer because just by the look on your face, right? You're just like, why do I have to talk about this?
Yeah, I had a dinner with a founder and a friend last week, and he said, "What? Why did you start a?" He was through some rough time recently, and he said, like, and you've been through the rough times, and you started again. My answer was, I think it's a bit like with the childbearing, right? Like
Yeah.
like women have multiple children, and somehow it's possible. And I haven't had a child as a mother, of
Right.
course, so I don't know, right? But I think there's something very hard and there is something very fulfilling. So this package in the end is such that you can repeat it.
Yeah. I don't think there's any other feeling comparable to taking something from 0 to 1. And like you, I've not had any of my own children. I've not birthed any of my own children, but you're right. You forget the pain, right? Like 3 years in, when you're still going, you forget what it was like on day 3 when like nobody would listen to you and everybody told you you were stupid for doing it, right?
Yes, yes, and opening a first bank account for the first time again. It's like
Yeah, it's like there's a little PTSD, right? You're just like, oh, come on, this one has to work,
again.
kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
is there something unique about the Polish startup ecosystem, right? In other words, you took that Google business from 0 to over 100 people, I think you said, right? That's a big deal too, right? Because not only do you like Google's a well-known name, but there are other things to do in Poland as well, and you've got to convince other people, like, yeah, you should actually do this. They're going to stay here. They're here for the long term. Like, what do we need to know about the Polish ecosystem that we don't already know? Because I know nothing.
Okay. So I think Poland has good education, and some of this is in the area of not applied science but abstract, like mathematics, computer science, physics, all of the life sciences. And Google in particular was interested in Poland because, well, there were some Polish people who said Poland is a great place. We have a lot of friends who are super smart.
Right.
But also there was data, right? So there's famous programming competition for people who specialize in algorithmics, which is a collegiate contest organized by ACM, and Polish teams were winning or were in the top few number of times. So this was like a proof that there
Right.
is a pool of very smart people who are in this country. Why wouldn't you hire them? And Google had the policy to go with their engineering offices where the people are.
Right.
Larry wanted to have, I don't know, 1,000 engineering offices. Then he figured out it's really very complex,
Yeah.
and there is fewer of them. But there is right now a very large engineering office in Warsaw with thousands of engineers employed. So
Do you feel
yeah.
a certain amount of pride, particularly for someone who left Poland, went and worked in Silicon Valley for a long time, came home, right? So brought the sort of Polish diaspora home, and then built like a global power in Warsaw via the Google experience? Do you feel a certain amount of pride? Do you know what I mean? Like, there was nothing here. No, but you must,
Yeah.
though. And I think it's a fair thing to talk about, right? Because it leads into the ability to found your own company. I mean, that's why. I don't think it's a random question.
Yeah, of course, right. That's that was one of my life choices to go back and
Right.
and try to what I experienced in Silicon Valley, which was amazing. The energy of VCs, but all the immigrants and people who were there, very experienced and very inexperienced, but full of energy, working together to build new things. I think there's a chance that it's not going to be happening only in Silicon Valley.
Right.
And today, I think we have proofs for this all over the place, right? Like London, Paris, in Europe, and I'm sure a lot of places in Asia as well.
Yeah. And that's the point I want to make. Because part of the reason why we do this, right, is not just to talk about e-commerce per se. And we'll get to No Magic in a moment. But it's to introduce to people this idea that what you think you know about, pick any country or any city, but what you think you know about Warsaw, what you think you know about Poland may be wrong, right? And here's the perfect example of why that is. Like, there's a vibrant, dynamic, well-educated, technical population there that was good enough for Google to put an office in Warsaw that doesn't have 3 people in it, that has hundreds of people in it. And I think that people need to know this so that when they think about that part of Europe, they can reevaluate the way they look at it. Is that fair?
Yes, yes, I think so. And, Poland benefited tremendously from joining NATO and joining EU, right? It's part of this large European community right now.
Right.
And maybe not as famous as London, Paris, or Berlin, right? But I think it is a vibrant hub, which is benefiting from both having people from a local population, but also, more and more significant immigration from other places in the world who would like to live in Europe, right?
Yeah.
And this is a part of Europe right now.
I'd love to come and experience it. I want to talk about No Magic and why it was founded. And the reason why is because, again, you did this whole Silicon Valley thing, then you worked at Google, and then you worked at another startup. So you're off doing things for other people. Yeah. And then you just have that itch. You must and say, wait a second, there's a gap here and I have to fill it with this thing. Like what did you see?
Yeah, so I'll start the story in the earlier 90s. I was
I like it.
Super lucky to study physics in a group of people who were passionate about internet and connectivity and ability to communicate, across countries or time zones. And Poland was connected to the internet by one of my friends sitting in the same basement in the physics department. He sent a first email over TCP protocol.
I love it.
That's the beginning of internet in Poland. And I was lucky because being so early in this kind of early adopters wave, I've noticed that there's something like World Wide Web. And together with a friend, we started first Polish web server. And people would send us an email that they have a new web server, so that we put them on the HTML page and we typed okay, there's another one. After a few months, it was not working.
I'm getting
anymore.
a chill. You should see my arm. I'm really getting a chill because it's so different to have been there then. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, go ahead. This is great already. Go ahead.
So and my career in a Silicon Valley and startup there, and then Google, I felt that the growth of internet was propelling all of this, right? Building various systems, but over time complex distributed systems that support this connectivity or support Google search. And I, to some extent, I would say that the Uber or ride-hailing services, right, is like a pinnacle of this, right? I have a phone in my pocket and I can call for a car which is going to come to me somewhere in the world and is going to drive me somewhere, right? And it's part of this wave of being able to connect everywhere with anyone, right? Over open protocols, across devices, and all of that, right? Now, a few years ago, I had this feeling that this huge change, which is really civilizational change for all of us, right? And anywhere in the world, sub-Saharan Africa, right? Like the phone is super important. That it is plateauing, right? That now, there's going to be new services and new ideas and so on, but they're not going to be as transformational as the first 25 years. Yep. And I've been thinking, okay, what's next? What can I spend my next few years on? And I think in the end, the connection between the artificial intelligence and machines and building systems that are autonomous, that can interact in a physical world, may be this, right? And I don't know for sure yet, but that's where I ended up. And the self-driving cars I think are a good example in this space where the promise is huge. The billions of dollars were invested. We're not yet driving back and forth from our home in self-driving cars.
We're not close, actually. But yeah, go ahead.
But I think we have the hope, and this is now widespread in our society, that it's going to happen. We're not doing self-driving cars. We're doing robots that help people with repetitive manual tasks. And I think that, if you're successful, and when I say we, I mean startup, but also other people, other companies that are trying to do the same, there is going to be a big civilizational change for all of us.
So when people think about robots, right, they think about humanoid formed things that actually look like we do and that behave like we do and have digits like we do. And if you look at, what's the name of that company? Boston Dynamics? I can never remember the name of it. It's been bought and sold so many
Yeah.
times. Right? But they look at the dog
Yeah.
and the jumping up and down and all this other stuff. But what can you define for us and our listeners and our viewers, like how you define like what a robot is?
Yeah. So I think I'm usually using a term autonomous robot because then it is a device, a machine, right, which can interact in the unstructured environment, right? In the environment where the action the robot takes is not, pick here on the left side, move 30 centimeters and drop it here, right? These robots that can can perform these actions.
It looks like you're making fun of the robots that do that. It's kind of cool. No, go ahead.
I am a bit because these robots exist for since 60s decades, or 50s, yeah. Right? And there are hundreds of thousands of them sold every year, and they're very popular in automotive industry, for example, or some part of electronics manufacturing and so on, and they're useful, right? But they're so narrow, right? You need to program exactly, and then it's going to do this thing exactly. When you look at the human, you tell them, hey, pick something from this stack of items and place it into the bags or into boxes that are on the right side. Right. And with kind of a one sentence, you describe a lot of actions that the human is going to take to complete the task, right? We don't have today this capability in robots, right? We're trying to add this capability to autonomous robots that will be able to get the higher level instruction and then complete the tasks as they're needed.
Do you feel like sometimes you have to explain to people that would look like simple actions to us, like you said, like I could say, hey, Casper, go over to the blue box and pick out the red thing. Your brain has already translated it probably into 3 different languages, and you know what you're going to do when you get there. But that predetermined, that presupposes that you know what a box is, that you know what red is, that you know what blue is, that you know what a thing is, right? And that's actually quite complex inside the brain. And to teach a robot, whether it looks like a humanoid or just looks like a box, how to do that, it's the unstructured part of it, at least to me, that seems like it's really hard. But you're right. Companies like Fanuc in Japan, right? Factory Automation, Numeric Controls, have factories at Mount Fuji that make robots kind of thing. So this has been going on for a while. What exactly are you building now, and how is it related to e-commerce per se?
Yes. Yes. So before I go there, I want to do a step back to what you just described, right? Like, what is the box? What is the ball? What is red? What is blue, right? And this has been beyond our grasp in computer science for a very long time. And that's why these robots are repetitive action robots that we've seen until now. But I think the door has opened, right? And the area of artificial intelligence and perhaps describing this more precisely, deep learning has changed the world roughly 10 years ago, right? And since there, the snowball is rolling and it's growing and it's impressive. And today, actually, you give a photo to a machine, and this machine is going to spit out a text that describes, hey, there is a blue box and a red ball inside, and it's sitting on a beach, and it's a cloudy day. and I don't know whether you've seen some of the generative systems that OpenAI and Google and others built, where you say, hey, paint for me a picture of a moose on a moon drinking beer and
listening to Led Zeppelin. I mean, they can actually put the music in the background too. Sorry, go ahead.
And you get a picture of a moose on a moon, doing these things, and then you get really 10 of these pictures, and then you can ask for another one in a Monet style, and you can ask for more things. So to some extent, our ability to understand and kind of express, transform to words, and from words to images has improved recently tremendously. And for me, the trigger to start No Magic was a research paper from Google, which was what they've done is that they took a number of robots, in front of them gray trays full of everyday items, and initially robots were just randomly trying to pick somewhere inside the tray, and they would detect whether this robot was able to pick an item or not. And based on this experience, they trained neural network that after several months, 800,000 attempts of picking, this neural network could control the same robot so that it picked 30 unseen earlier items in 31 attempts. And to me, this was mind-blowing, right? Like, there isn't really someone describing, hey, this is a pen, and this is a glass, and this is a ball, and this is how you pick the ball. It was just the experience of the robot that created this ability, and I would even say intuition, to be able to pick these things. And as I said, to me, this was mind-blowing. I said, okay, so maybe now we can just teach robots how to do things, and maybe this is going to be a civilizational change. And here I am.
Just get a better understanding? Let's get a better understanding of this research paper. So in these 800,000 attempts, and then in the second attempt that you talked about, where 30 out of 31, they picked the previously unseen items. Were they given instructions to pick them? Like, hey, go grab the blank piece of paper kind of thing? Or did they just pick unseen items that they'd never seen before? I just want a little bit more detail there.
Yes. So the task was always to empty the bin, right? And try to do it as efficiently as possible. Right. So 30 items in a bin, pick them out without telling what it is. The difficulty was in a variety of items. So kind of everyday items, usually small ones because the tray wasn't huge, but there were tricky things like a band for hair, which is round with the hole, right? And the best way to grasp it is through the middle and then outside of the band. And that was one of the emergent behaviors of the robot, that just based on experience trying to pick things, this neural network decided that this is the way to pick these round things with the hole in the middle.
Cool.
Super cool, right? It wasn't super practical. It was a research paper, but it was showing the direction that you can, based on the experience, a little bit like children, little children, they repeat the same silly things a million times, right? The robot, if it repeats 800,000 times the silly things, it will actually learn how to use its gripper. It was using 2-finger gripper and handle these everyday items.
So this blew your mind, and you said, wait a second, how can I adapt this to something in the real world?
Yes, I think, in the end, I was curious. So I started a small team of people who are also curious, trying to figure out, how we could reproduce it. How does it really work? Do we understand this? And then, once this advanced a bit and we saw, okay, this is within our reach to try to build systems like this, we started thinking, where could we apply it, right? Like that seems that there is some application to to the whole research that is happening. And
can we go back to this experience you had in your friend's basement, sending like the first email, building the first websites, cataloging the first websites, and understanding just like the power of that connectivity? And then fast forward to when you see this paper, which could have been written in like 1975, and even if it had been, you never would have seen it because there would have been no way for you to even know it existed. Do you understand the point I'm making?
Yeah.
But because of this thing that you discovered in the basement, as soon as that report came out, maybe your friend still worked at Google, maybe you just had some connectivity to it, but boom, it was like on your screen. You could read it, share it with your friends. And then the impact of that can be so much bigger, exponentially bigger than it could have been before because of all the things you've experienced up until today, no?
Yes. So I think, the progress of our civilization, it's super interesting, right? Because first we needed to have agriculture, to have some time so that we don't, gather food all of our time.
Right, and then die, eat and then die, basically.
Then we needed industrial revolution. And, one of my examples around the robots is that, look, we have machines at home. We wouldn't call them robots, but washing machine and a dishwasher are crucial, right?
Completely.
Because otherwise we would be, washing our clothes and spending all the time at the sink. So all of these things allow us to do, I think, the crazy, amazing things we can do today.
Yeah, it was so funny. I don't know where I saw this, but I saw an old Ronald Reagan advertisement on General Electric Theater where he's sitting with his wife and they say, honey, look at all of our fun electric friends. And they were talking about like a coffee maker and a washing machine. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen. I think it was in the 1950s, but not that different from what you're saying here. So talk to me about the application of all of this stuff into e-commerce. Like what's so hard about this anyway? And to give you some reference, when I was in college, one of my summer jobs was working in a Kmart distribution center. So I literally stood near a conveyor belt and I would pick things off the conveyor belt and put it somewhere and then move it somewhere. And these distribution centers, as you know, are huge, like 3 football fields, huge. So why is this so hard and why do robots solve this problem? Like what's so hard about this?
Yes. So I think, we focus on some part, and this is part of our, experience in the journey as a company. We focused on some area, which is e-commerce fulfillment. So,
I've heard
they're
of that.
very focused on
Small
e-commerce.
business,
Yes.
nobody cares about it. Go ahead.
And what's difficult in e-commerce fulfillment is that a lot of bigger players, right? They have a lot of different items that they offer to sell to their customers, right? And it's from perhaps in a small warehouse 10,000 SKUs to perhaps a big warehouse where there is 10 million plus SKUs, right? And you have one of the customers who's at that scale. So when you're completing orders from a customers or dealing with individual items, they actually become very different, right? So when things come from manufacturers, it's usually cardboard boxes, fairly uniform, packed in a container and then packed on a pallet, right? But when you go down to individual items, you have T-shirt in plastic wrap, right? You have iPhone in a box. You have USB cable. You have an umbrella.
You have a 65-inch television set. I don't know how that works for e-commerce, but it does, right?
Yes. So the huge range of items, right? And this is where we believe that these AI-based systems where we work on their intuition, not like specificity. I know this pen, so I can pick this pen, but rather I know what the pens are. I know they come in different colors, so if another one shows up, I pretty much know how to handle it. This is what we're able to build into our robots, right? That they're able to handle the millions of different SKUs that are in a warehouse. That's one. And then the second thing that is super difficult is that these robots need to be reliable to actually replace human manual repetitive labor, right? So they need to operate autonomously for extended periods of time, something like an hour at least. And this is difficult because in a physical world, things are not predictable. So you pick an item and maybe the suction cup didn't seal completely and it drops, and now you need to deal with this situation, right? Or you pick an item and the box starts to open and you need to deal with that situation, right? So these are the being able to perform at 100% of a time is a big challenge today.
You made me think about like just the fear associated with dropping something, right? So when I worked in this distribution center, I knew that some of the stuff that I was carrying was fragile. And there was a certain kind of extra care that I would take. I'm like, oh no, because if I drop this thing, that's like my full month's salary and I need this money for college kind of thing.
It's gone. You should drop it.
Yes.
Right? Martin would drop it, but that's a different story altogether. No, but you know what I mean? But also the fear of getting fired, right? Like I want to outperform, I want to do better. How does that work in the instance where it's just an autonomous robot? If it can drop stuff, who ends up being responsible? And I'm super curious, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, right? But like, who's insured in that space?
Yes. Okay. So maybe first, we offer these robots as a service, right? So we sign SLA, service level agreement, with our customers, and it says this should be the speed of the robot, the availability, the success rate, right? So we continuously work with our customers so that as their inventory changes and sometimes their process changes, they improve, right? They're usually kind of fast evolving, modern e-commerce companies, that we adapt, that the robots do what's necessary to be done. So that's one. The second thing, we try to filter and not send to robots things that are somehow not good for the robot. So the capabilities of the grippers are limited. We can't pick everything that the human can pick today. We're going in that direction. We would like to be there, but we're not there yet. And for example, in the space, we don't send liquid glass containers with liquids to the robot. Dropping bottles in general is not good. It's a big mess afterwards, and we don't want this. We don't want this to happen.
I just have this vision of one robot dropping a glass bottle and the other robot's just going like, really?
Seriously? Again? 3 times this week.
So they don't yet have this cognitive ability, but one day, yes.
And actually, I'm super curious. Like, what's the status right now? And like, is it working right now? Like, can you really replace some humans into the warehouses from robots, or is it still almost there but not yet?
Okay, so I think so that you have a complete picture, let me give you a slightly broader picture. There is a good number of warehouses that are very highly automated, right? So for example, the storage is no longer in boxes on the shelves, but they're plastic bins, and you put something into a plastic bin, and some system takes this bin somewhere, stores it, and when you need to pick one item, something comes out, the bin comes back to the picking station, and now you can pick an item, right? In these warehouses, the operators are stationary, and the goods come to them, and they usually need to put it to another box on a conveyor, or they perform very simple action. And this is where we target our robots, at the highly automated warehouses that already have this ability. And in these situations, yes, I think we have a number of robots in production. They do well. We measure their performance every day, every week, and every month, and they're able to help with a very repetitive manual work that would otherwise have to be done by humans. And in this context, I don't know how close you are to the warehouse side of e-commerce, but in Europe, in the US, finding people who actually perform these tasks in warehouses is a challenge, and the challenge seems to be growing.
It's so hard. I mean, I did
the
it.
Automation.
I did it, but I did it 40 years ago, and it was just like really, really hard. What is it like from a sales perspective? In other words, when you go, I mean, there's all this automation taking place anyway, right? But and I think you said this too, like the robots are getting more and more specific in the tasks and more advanced in the tasks that they can perform. Do you feel like, are we going through this massive change in the way that warehouses and other sort of inside buildings are automated, so that things are moving so fast so that when you show up with like the newest thing, the teams that are there just go like, bring me the new one? Or do you have to go, you know what I mean? Or are there still places out there where people are just like, we don't need robots. We got plenty of people here. It's a low cost, labor. What is that like?
Yeah. So I think, when we discuss with operators of these warehouses, and whether these are big brands that have their own warehouses or 3PLs, third-party logistics operators, everybody says that, being able to man the warehouse, being able to prepare for the peaks, for the holiday season, Christmas, whatever is the holiday in a given locale, is a problem, right? Retention of people is a problem. There was a recent publication, I think a leaked report from Amazon, saying that their attrition in some of the warehouses is 129% a year.
Is that attrition?
So like,
that's not really attrition. That's an avalanche of people leaving. Can I ask you this though? Because this is actually super interesting, and I'm only asking because I don't have a horse in this race at all, right? But you're in this every single day. you read all this news in the financial press about how robots are going to replace humans, and because of that, humans are now going to somehow be like destitute and poor, and no one's going to have a job. But it sounds like you're suggesting that this is coming at these big providers from two sides. One is they want to automate, obviously, because it may be lower cost. We can argue about whether that's true or not, right? Because robots aren't free. They don't just work for free and just say, like, thank you. Like, there's a cost associated with it. There's a service cost, a software cost, a maintenance cost. Like, it's not super cheap.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, humans are realizing, just like you said, I don't want to farm anymore. I just want to go to the supermarket and buy my food. And in the same way, like, I don't want to work in a distribution center in a warehouse. I want to buy things from that in a way that gets it to me in 10 minutes. Right. So are you, do you feel like all of this noise around the social displacement of people that work in warehouses because of robots is a little bit overblown?
I would think it's overblown, and my worry is the opposite, right? That we will not be able to automate the whole fulfillment process fast enough to sustain, what we expect. And I'm not even saying, next hour delivery, but next day delivery is really nice, or second day delivery. Okay, let's make sure that this, we can continue to have. But when you go through a simple test, right, and you would ask in a preschool kids there, hey, would anyone here want to work in a warehouse when you grow up?
It's a super good point, because I was thinking when I was a junior in high school, they actually came into our class, into our math class, and said, okay, everybody in this class should grow up to be a computer programmer. It was almost like a scene out of The Graduate, where it was like plastics are the new thing. When I was in high school, it was programming computers, and they walked in and told us why. But, the one thing they didn't tell us was we should be warehouse distribution workers. Not that there's anything bad with that, but it wasn't like an aspirational thing we wanted to do. And just like you said, if you can mechanize something and give humans more leisure time and free time, theoretically, that should be better for the humans. Yeah.
And I think in the end, and this is what my co-founder Tristan always says, people are better at things that are creative, that require empathy, that require contact with other people, and not necessarily this mechanical task, right? When you think about the simple example of the restaurant, you want a waiter, right? You want to have a discussion. You want to know what's good today. You want the hospitality. But then the dirty dishes, right? Like, could robot take it away?
This is the perfect example. This is the perfect example. When I'm sitting down in a fancy restaurant and I say, I want to have the filet mignon, but which wine should I have with it? I don't want a robot saying, get the Chateaubriand. Do you know what I mean? Like, I want to talk to somebody. Yeah, but my wife is allergic to that. So what's the best replacement? Is a great conversation to have. But you're right. In the back, I don't care who's washing the dishes. No impact on me. Yeah. Perfect example. Yeah, I interrupted you.
So in that sense, I think, there is a path where, these types of washing machines and dishwashers, they show up in other places, right? In places in logistics, in manufacturing, in perhaps taxi driving, and I think there is future where people still have fantastic things to do, and they're not all poor on the street and kind of not able to find a job, right? And
because I think if you free people up to be more creative. Look, there was no such thing as a UX designer 10 years ago, right? But now you can't find enough of them, right? So this idea that somehow we're going to run out of things we need humans to do, to me, feels a bit like anathema. But I'll leave that to people smarter than I am to figure it out. How long has, and Martin and I were talking about this earlier, what's the genesis of the name No Magic?
Okay, all right. So I'm very particular about names. I think names are very important, and
my feelings. Go ahead.
It was a journey that took us, I don't know, half a year or longer. So the first insight was, I've been in a bar in Berlin, and Berlin is known for cash-only economy, right? So it's a center of the Europe, and then you need to pay with cash. But I insisted that maybe I can pay with a card in this bar, and the lady said, I think we can do it. And she pulls out this little white box, sum up. says, maybe we could do it somehow. And then she prepares the payment, and I just tap my card, and the payment goes through. And she says, "This is magic." And of course, we are having a big laugh with other people in the bar, because, well, come on, how is it magic, right? Like every surrounding country, people do it
all the
time, right? So it's not a magic. And then there was this, it of course got us back to the third law of Clarke, which says, sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, right? So here I had the anchor point that we're building the sufficiently advanced technology and the magic. But then, of course, magic.com was taken, right? Like that's a hard
of course.
one.
That did not surprise you, of course, because otherwise that would have been magic,
yes,
I think. But go ahead.
Yes, and I think the other part was there's a company called No Machine, which does virtual desktop, right? And I thought, this is like so cool to be no magic.
I like it. How long has No Magic been around now?
Over 5 years.
So
yeah,
what's the status of it? Like, in other words, you have customers in multiple countries. You have customers, like big customers, small customers. Like, what does growth look like to you?
Yeah. So we have customers in Western Europe, in France, Germany, and Switzerland. So in different countries, and we have few robots with each one of them. And we're trying to grow, deliver more robots, which I think, you asked earlier, what is the adoption path, right? Like what is really happening in the market? And what's happening in the market that everybody believes this should happen, but there are not too many hard proofs that these robots are useful. But with one of the customers, we had 2 robots for a while with them. And now we're installing 2 more. And for the next year, we're planning another 6 or 8 robots, right? So it's clear that at some point when these customers, warehouse operators realize that it actually works, then, the barrier disappears. And for the new extension of the warehouse, they say, okay, I want it built with the robots. And I think, this is going to take us, the whole industry, a couple more years to build this awareness. And at some point, a picking robot will be like a forklift, right? Like you don't ask whether you need a forklift in a warehouse. You build a warehouse and you order forklifts, right? Like they go in pairs.
Exactly. Could you imagine that? What is that thing over there? I don't know.
And actually, what's the reaction today of your customer? And the way I'm asking this question is just to understand, like, what's the current status of the technology and what are the outcomes? Like, are your customers super happy right now and they order more, like kind of what they are doing, or are they believing into your idea and they want to help and they want to support and they understand it's not super ready yet, but they believe in it? So what's the status from their point of view? Like, how do they react to your existing customers?
That's a very good question. I think our first customers, they were early adopters. So
they have to be.
They have to be, right? They had the vision that, you need to go in that direction. And, in some countries like Switzerland, okay, it's the labor is very expensive, and it's hard to find people to come into the warehouse, and it's hard to manage the peaks, right? Because again, the holiday season, Mondays, right? Like the day and the week is not even in e-commerce. But I think we now convince them. And we still look for people who are, not late adopters, but people who are interested in taking advantage of technological change, right? Who are brave. Now, there are some clear areas where we should improve, right? Like what I mentioned before is we would like our robots to be able to pick anything that's pickable by a human hand in a warehouse. We're not quite there yet, right? And this is an area where, if we're at, let's say, 70 or 80% of coverage of items in a warehouse, it's fine, right? Like it's easy to manage. If for some other warehouse we're at 50%, this is the customer is not going to be happy in the end, right? Like they would like more of the flow to be able to go to the robots.
Are you building and designing and manufacturing the robots yourself in Poland?
No, we are primarily building AI and software that directs what the robot should do. The robotic arms we're buying, from the industrial providers from the market. They're available since, continuously improved since the 60s, and we're now also investing more into the area of grippers, because this is where there are a lot of very good components, but there aren't really like solutions that would allow to grab
Can I just
everything.
ask you this? Are you amazed sometimes? I always ask entrepreneurs this question about the thing that they're building. Like once you see it and once you're involved in it, you can't unsee it, right? You can't stop thinking about it, right? So I look at all the media businesses and I just think like, why did you do that? Or how come you can't do it this way and stuff like that? I can't unsee it. Are you amazed sometimes when you see like a little kid pick something up, just like how unbelievably subtle the movements in a hand are? When you think about talking about the design and the software that just supports a gripper. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yes, yes. So I think looking at human behavior is kind of one of the um, directions in which we're going, and we're trying to apply this. And on the other hand, I think not every problem needs to be solved in a humanoid
Agreed.
way, but looking at little children that are in the process of learning
Right.
motor skills, it's amazing, right? Like they really repeat these unoptimal movements, and then a few days later they optimize it a bit, and they continue doing this in a way which I think is now starts to be available for robots. And what's really mind-blowing, right, is that human brain is not transferable,
Right.
and human learning is not transferable
Right.
easily, um, even though books exist. But with robots, we can actually take the experience of robot
Right.
A and completely apply it to
Super
robot
interesting.
B, right? And that's why it's worth all the investment that we're doing for the first robot and the second robot and third robot, because the robot 1000 is going to actually benefit from this, right? And the incremental cost for that robot
Zero.
1000 will be much
Oh, it's
much
closer to
smaller.
zero. It's collapsing to zero for sure. Right. Do you see?
Yes. Yes.
I want to use the right word. The word that jumped in my head was quantum, but that has a real mathematical meaning. So I don't want to use that word. But do you see these
Yeah.
like exponential step changes as you continue to develop and write software and then see like you start solving problems and start building this learning, right? This advanced learning and the build the artificial intelligence, right? And build the deep learning. And then you see like step changes and think, oh my gosh, do you know what I mean? Like, I can't believe they know that now kind of thing.
Yes. This is happening, and as I said, the deep learning area for vision, for robotics, for other spaces is developing very quickly right now, and we see kind of amazing achievements that are happening. And I think as a company we're trying to get informed by this, import some of this into our thinking and our development, ignore some other areas. Um, One of these recent breakthroughs,
Go
I don't
ahead.
know whether it's interesting or not, but there is a thinking and work in research on kind of everyday robots that can do 1,000
Right.
different things, right? 1,000 different actions, and people were trying to catalog. Okay, how do we describe these actions, right? Like, what is the best? Like, okay, pick an item and then drive to the fridge, and how can we express this? And one of the recent findings or results in research, maybe there's going to be improvement over this, is that the best um, description of these robot actions are words, is language. That you can link the robot behavior and language. And there isn't a meta language of like, capital letter
Right.
things. It's best to say, drive to the
Yeah.
fridge in the kitchen. And if the robot can understand it, then this is the next step, which is very interesting because it goes back to our human
Right.
capabilities, right? Where the language is such an important component of our life
So
and
you
our
just
behavior.
made, while you were talking, I was just trying to think because you said robots can do thousands of things. And I was just trying to catalog what I've actually done today. Literally, excuse me, from waking up in the morning to making myself some lunch to adding a few more almonds into the salad kind of thing and just trying to figure out the order in which I wanted to do things, right? In other words, we don't talk a lot about human optimization, but you know, Martin had to come over to the studio to do stuff, and he had to bring things with him. And before he came here, he had to think while he was eating lunch, let's say, like what to bring and what to, but you know what I mean, right?
Completely.
And it's super complex.
Yeah.
Are we at a point, or almost at a point, right, where we're close to this breakthrough where you can just give a robot like a full task list, and they can just look around and figure out, okay, I'm going to do it in this order because I'm going to optimize based on what I know and what I've learned. And then, like you said, what Martin learned today about his optimization, I can't do. He can't cut and paste it into my brain. And there's not enough space, to be fair. He's a lot smarter than I am. But the point is, you can do this with robots, right? So are you thinking about that level of optimization too? In other words, once we get them to know stuff, can they then optimize stuff as well?
So that's the hope. And the answer to question, are we there now?
Of course not, but are we going there? Does that make sense? Is all I want to know.
Yeah. I think we're trying to go there, right? And the problem today is that humans are quite successful at these actions, right? So if you decided to eat lunch, you actually ate lunch, right? And the robots, if they're not super optimized, they're maybe 30, maybe 50% successful in these actions. So these are research robots, right? They can try to do a lot of things, but they don't do them very well. What we do at NoMagic, we're trying to say, okay, this robot is only picking from the box and placing to this other box, but it does it super well, right? And that's when it becomes useful, because if you ask your 2-year-old to prepare a dinner for you, well,
we know where that's going. It's almost like asking me to prepare dinner. It's not much of a difference. I just lost my train of thought. Anyway,
actually, I have a question for you, and I'm really wondering, like for example, when I see self-driving cars video or example or stuff like that, I never see someone staying at the steering wheel and just watching the road. Like we always see people doing something else in the car, like right, and kind of like I don't know what kind of things that they can do, but they kind of sell the self-driving car as bringing new experiences and bringing something new that you can do in your car. So did you discover some new things that are now doable thanks to your robot that we could not do before? Or did you discover it yet or not? Or is there something interesting on that?
So I think the interesting things that are happening in the space, and this is maybe not directly answer to your question, but nearby, is that for one of the customers, we are running robots for some time before anyone comes to the warehouse. So that's the kind of cool thing, that the warehouse can work on its own, the lights out and the robots work. The second thing that happened is that we offer our robots as a service, but part of the service is that we have remote operators who help robots, right? So if there is something where the robot drops an item and it cannot autonomously repick it, it doesn't know where it is, although it should do it autonomously. But if it doesn't, then there's someone thousands of kilometers away who could tell the robot, hey, this is a good place to pick, right? And this is the benefit of the connectivity that we've built until now. And we have these, you could say, robot pilots, right, or remote operators who are helping robots at the customer sites, which is actually interesting because your back-breaking job is now partly done by robot and partly done by someone sitting in front of their laptop, at home. It may be a midnight, but they're still at home.
Do you think about expanding outside of Europe? Like, do you think you have a proximity problem maybe where because you're in Europe, you're thinking about serving Europe, but there's like massive growth in warehousing and distribution and e-commerce in, let's just say, I don't know, Southeast Asia or in India, that you should also be selling into those markets too?
So we would love to. I think the North America is kind of next on the list. But we are really, we're still a small company, a startup, right? Building our first robots. There's such a big need in Western Europe that there's really, no need to go to the other markets yet, right? But I hope that something like a year and a half from now, we'll actually do it, right? And we will start expanding internationally because the technology is applicable, right? It's our ability to create a company on 2 continents, right? Which is one of the limiting factors right now.
So one of the things that I used to watch was when they would send, like, when NASA, right, would send a probe like to the moon or to Saturn or to Jupiter, they would always send it with some experiments to do, right? Like to pick this rock and then do some scientific experiments on it and then send back that data, and they'd analyze the data and say, like, Eureka, they used to have frogs there, some such thing, right? Can you do the same thing in the
Yes.
warehouse where somebody remotely, right? Somebody in Warsaw is managing a robot that's in Berlin or somewhere in Germany, let's say, right? And they test something like, I wonder if this could be possible. And because it's an IoT device, it's collecting all this data. I don't know if it's got cameras on it as well, but you must be collecting a ton of data. Do you take that then back, analyze it, and
Yes.
then use that data to then not rewrite, but like adjust in the software and all this other stuff as well?
So, I've been working at Google, and Google trains people to hoard data, to collect anything you can, any signal, and then make it useful to improve
Right.
your services. And so we do that, and we collect all the images, video footage, reading from sensors, robot motions, and so on for every action that robot takes in our cloud system, which helps us and allows us to improve their actions based on data and not just kind of anecdotal evidence. But we also have the other ability, which is we call it A/B tests, right? So on the robots, we can run different versions of the, a picking algorithm or a packing algorithm or a strategy to use the gripper, and we're still, a startup, which means that we're iterating very quickly, changing our systems quickly. This is the way to win with the big established companies that have more money and more people by, being able to experiment a lot, right? So one of our company values is improve by experimenting, and I think we do this a lot.
That's great.
I didn't even know that. Just completely nailed it.
Yeah, it's you've discovered what we do. You can start another robotic picking startup now.
That was the secret.
That was the secret. Well, one more thing, and then I'll let you go, unless Martin has more stuff. I'm sure he does, but
I have one more thing too.
do you feel like there's a surprise maybe from some of your partners and potential partners that all of this work is being done by a team in Poland? Do you know what I mean? Do you feel like you have to explain a little bit more, even today, after all of your experience, sending the first emails, writing the first web server, all that kind of stuff? Do you feel like at some point they're like, why am I buying this product from Poland kind of thing?
Not really.
That's good enough for me.
I think we have some competition in the US, and at least European customers, they perceive the Atlantic as a big body of water, and they value that we can fly to them next day, and it's an hour flight, and we're in the same time zone, and so on. And there are wonderful companies in California trying to do the same things, but it's really harder for them to get the proximity to customers and trust from customers because, well, their engineers are 9 hours away, and it's hard to get the improvement or the response to emergency or something like that.
You were saying?
Yeah, I just had another question for you that was like in my mind. I'm wondering, like, because now we have a discussion about putting robots into warehouses, but is there some other super cool stuff that we don't know, but because you are into the AI world and into the robotic world? Is there some other startups that you see around you or other companies doing some crazy things like this?
Yeah, I want to know.
Yeah, I really want to know. I'm really wondering if there's other crazy projects like yours.
Yes, well, so one of our investors, Khosla Ventures.
I like how you toss that out there. One of our investors, Khosla Ventures. Oh, those guys. Okay.
Yes.
Congratulations, by the way. Go ahead.
Thank you. So Vinod Khosla is a visionary, right? Who tries to improve our society by investment into technology that is going to improve our society, right? And yes, and some of his investments are longevity for dogs, which of course will be then
humans,
translated to longevity for people. Nuclear fusion doing drugs on the orbit by shooting the little factory there and then dropping the results down to the Earth. Yes, there is a lot of crazy stuff going on right now, and in the logistics area, it's maybe not as flashy, but there are people with very good ideas on the last mile delivery and what's happening in the warehouse. I'm sure you're aware of Exotech. That's one of the French companies that that has done super well recently with an innovative way of doing storage in the warehouses. So really, I'm sure there's a good number of success stories and some crazy ones as well. The super crazy ones, they usually sound better than they're practical.
Exactly. Exactly.
And in the end, to build a successful company, you have to be practical and think about the customers and revenue and so on. In the end, and I think in the warehouses, the change is incremental, right? One of the very conscious decisions that we've made is that we work with the customers who already have this highly automated warehouse, and we try to build in the robot to existing station. And it would be easier to design robots for the new warehouse, right? Where there's optimization that goes towards the robot behavior, not the human needs. But the warehouses are being built over, a year to 2 years, right? That would not allow us to iterate quickly, right? So in the end, you need to also be practical and take these non-optimal routes to be able to test your ideas and iterate with the customers on what you need to actually deliver
awesome.
to them.
Super interesting.
Okay. Kasper Nowicki, I hope I was close again, a co-founder and the CEO of No Magic, and I'm never going to get that scene in the bar out of my mind when you just go, the woman goes, whoa! It was great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Kasper.